May 29th, 1967. Monday. Makati was quiet. The sun hadn't yet broken through the Manila haze. Traffic was hours away. Along the edge of South Superhighway, a garbage collector walked his usual route. Cart behind him, head down. This was how it was meant to be. In the early hours, before anyone was watching, when things could be thrown away without questions. The pile looked ordinary at first. Wrappers, broken furniture, old food, the usual. But something was wrong. He slowed, stared, took a step closer. Lying in the trash was something that didn't belong. 2 pieces, pale, curved, cleanly cut. At first, maybe he told himself it was something else. A mannequin, a prank. But then he reached out and touched the skin. It was cold, not room temperature, not from the night air. Cold, like it had come from a freezer. He stumbled back. It was what he thought it was. A pair of human legs, severed just above the knees, still supple, still fresh, red nail polish on the toes. And yet, this wasn't where the story began. A few days earlier, late last week, another body part had surfaced in Santa Cruz. A hand. It had been left in front of a small barbershop on Recto Avenue, placed inside a paper bag, wrapped in newspaper, as if packed carefully, deliberately, badly decomposed. The fingers curled in, almost as if trying to grip something that was no longer there. No one knew who found it first, only that it had been strange, quietly terrifying, and then forgotten. Until now. 2 body parts, found days apart, miles away, one fresh, one rotting, one wrapped, one not. If they were connected, if they belonged to the same woman, then one question lingered. How many pieces were there? And how many had yet to be found? Days passed. The investigators had no name, no face, just legs. The case made the front page, but leads were thin. There were no witnesses, no missing person reports that lined up, no signs of struggle near the site. Whoever had left the body there had done it cleanly and quickly. The only thing left to do was check fingerprints. It was a long shot, but they tried anyway. And to their surprise, a match surfaced. It came from an old police clearance application, filed 5 years earlier. The print was faint, worn with age, but it was enough. The victim's name was Lucila Lalu. It didn't mean much at first, but as they dug deeper, her life began to take shape. She wasn't from Manila. She had come to the city in 1961 from a quiet agricultural town called Candaba in Pampanga, a place known for its watermelon farms, its rice fields, its long tradition of fishing. But Lucila had more ambition. She didn't want to fish. She didn't want to farm. She came as far as they could tell, alone, determined. Landing at the Pagoda Soda Fountain, a busy little establishment along Rizal Avenue. There she worked as a waitress. Quiet, unremarkable, just another name on the payroll. But as investigators pieced together her story, they learned something they didn't expect. Lucila had been watching the business, not just working in it, studying it, watching the money move, watching who paid and who didn't, watching the rhythms of the crowd, the habits of the owners. She saved what she could, waited. And then, within a few years, she bought the place. Pagoda nightclub, the same venue where she once carried trays, was now hers. Not just the building, the business, the brand. Her name was on the deed, her name on the contracts. And that wasn't the end of it. She'd opened a second establishment right inside the club, a beauty salon called Lucy's House of Beauty. It catered specifically to the women working under her roof: dancers, entertainers, hostesses, women who needed hair, makeup, manicures, a place to get ready for work and recover from it. To the investigators, Lucila was smart and business savvy, someone who didn't just survive in Manila, but thrived in it. In just a few years, Lucila had become rich, and that meant a clear motive. They immediately knew they had to piece together her finances, talk to employees, trace who moved through her world and when. Lucila was living a complicated life, and now they had to take it apart. But just as the shape of her life began to take form, another piece of her body turned up: a torso. The discovery of the torso was tragic, but for the investigators, it also meant something else. In cases like these, every new body part mattered. Sometimes, a single fragment could reveal the cause of death. Sometimes, it could point to a suspect. In a case as fractured as this, they had hoped it would sharpen the picture. Instead, it blurred it even further. The torso had been found trussed in a baka rope wrapped in a newspaper dated May 23, 1967, just like the severed hand discovered days earlier. The head was missing, and the wounds across the body, jagged, raw, and violent, suggested something even worse. There had been a struggle. Matched against the other body parts recovered so far, the signs were hard to miss. The brutality hadn't happened all at once. Some of the injuries seemed to have been inflicted while she was still alive. The horror of it was almost too much to process. But horror didn't solve cases. They needed something solid, something procedural, something they could chase. The newspapers, as benign as they seemed, their presence at two separate scenes was enough to push the investigation toward one obvious possibility: someone from the printing world. It wasn't much, but it was something they could chase. They began pulling at the thread, quietly, methodically, looking for anyone who might have had access to both Lucila and the tools of the trade. And eventually, they found a man, a lover, someone who worked in publishing, an executive connected to Lucila by whispers. But according to the surviving records, this lead had led investigators nowhere. In fact, official reports didn't even bother to record his name. It was a dead end, but not a complete loss. Because in chasing that thread, investigators uncovered something else. Something they hadn't known about before. Lucila owned more than just a nightclub. She had recently bought a space in Cubao, a place where one might expect her to live. Except she didn't. It wasn't for her. It was for a man named Florante Relos. Florante Relos had turned up in the investigation, but it wasn't anything the police took too seriously at first. For a woman like Lucila Lalu, names popped in and out of her life all the time. Men especially, lovers, friends, business acquaintances. The lines blurred in a world like hers. And most names, even the important ones, never lasted long. Florante seemed like just another one of them, working, supposedly, as a cocktail lounge waiter. Except of all the names that were thrown across, Florante was now tied to something real. A piece of property. Lucila had paid for the Cubao apartment, signed the lease, paid the rent. No small sum for anyone, let alone a 19-year-old boy still finding his way through Manila's streets. To the investigators, that meant something. But who was Florante? A rival? A business partner? No, Lucila was too sharp for that, too careful. She wouldn't spend that kind of money on a colleague, not without a reason. He had to be something else, something closer. Something personal. So they went looking. It was mid-afternoon by the time they reached the building. A few steps up the stairwell, past cracked concrete and peeling paint. And there he was, Florante Relos, 19 years old, slouched in the doorway, dead drunk at 3 in the afternoon. It was worse than they had expected. To the investigators, this was an immediate warning sign. In cases like these, heavy drinking often sat at the center of violence. Spousal abuse, domestic rage, drunken regrets that ended in blood. But between Florante and Lucila, things seemed messier. Florante was just 19 years old. He had the unmistakable look of a boy not yet hardened by life, with a baby face that made him appear even younger than he was. On the other hand, Lucila was pushing 30, a woman who was not only street smart, but business hardened. This wasn't random. It had to be something more complicated. Maybe it was passion, twisted, and broken. They waited for him to sober up, and once Florante could finally speak, the story came in fragments. Yes, he said. He had been Lucila's lover. No, he hadn't seen her the night she vanished. Why? He had been out, drinking, with friends, as hard as he did this afternoon. If what he said was true, then he couldn't have done it. But something about it sounded too rehearsed, too easy. They called his friends anyway, and the story held. Perhaps it was true. Perhaps Florante was simply a heavy drinker, and this was routine for him, and for the people he drank with. But how much weight could an alibi carry when all the witnesses were friends? How could they be sure they weren't covering for him? And if they were just as drunk as he was, how could they even be sure he hadn't slipped away? Back at the precinct, they learned how much Lucila had spent on him. The Cubao apartment, the rent, the small comforts. Not a small sum, not for a boy like Florante, and not for a woman like Lucila. She had come from nothing, from the fishing towns and floodplains of Pampanga, from a life where every peso mattered, where money wasn't spent, it was saved, guarded, fought for. But here she was, pouring it out for him. This wasn't just a fling. It was perhaps something more. To the investigators, it meant one thing. If Florante's alibi didn't hold, his motive did. There was no way he'd kill her. But surely he must know something, being this close to her. He must have heard something. So they pressed Florante harder, leaning in, pushing past the fog of alcohol and fear. He blinked and tried hard to remember, before a thought struck him. It came out slowly. He remembered there had been a man. Not just any man. A patrolman. Someone who wore his anger like a second uniform. Someone who didn't bother to hide it. He had seen Florante and Lucila together once, standing too close, talking too long. Something in the way Lucila laughed, in the way Florante looked at her, set him off. The patrolman had crossed the room in 3 strides, shoved Lucila aside, grabbed Florante by the collar, and then the blows came. A fist to the mouth, a knee to the ribs, a boot to the stomach. Florante barely remembered hitting the floor, only the taste of blood, the sound of Lucila screaming, the scattered faces in the club pretending not to see. The patrolman hadn't liked the idea of Lucila having another lover. He hadn't liked it at all. And now, sitting in the precinct, slumped in a worn-out suspect's chair, Florante finally said his name. Añano de Vera. It didn't make sense. Añano de Vera was a patrolman for the Manila Police Department. So how was he wrapped up in this? Was he just another jealous lover? And if he couldn't let go of Lucila in life, what would he do to her in death? As expected, finding Añano de Vera wasn't hard. He was one of them, a patrolman with the Manila Police District. His file sat in the system like all the others. Rank, assignment history, disciplinary notes. It took less than a morning to pull his records, less than an afternoon to find his address. On paper, he was what they expected. A street cop with a serviceable record, a few commendations, a few infractions. Nothing that shouted murder, nothing that said monster. So could this really be the man who tore Lucila to pieces? Well, it depended on what they found beyond the paper. The address led them to a quiet street, faded paint, rusted gates, a house pressed too tightly between its neighbors. They half expected him to be gone, but De Vera was there. When they spoke to him, he didn't even seem surprised. In conversation, they learned more than they had expected. De Vera had known Lucila for years, back when she was just a waitress at the Pagoda Soda Fountain, long before the nightclub, back when she was still climbing, still learning how to move through the city without falling. They had spent years by each other's side, living, fighting, and building a life together, and they even had a child. But De Vera wasn't a free man. He had been married the entire time, tied to another woman, another life. And maybe that, in itself, became a motive. What if Lucila had wanted to tell his wife? Surely he would have lost it. An angry De Vera wasn't uncommon. According to Florante Relos, he had been beaten badly, enough to leave blood on the floor and witnesses scrambling to look away. For that, De Vera could be charged with grave misconduct, suspended from the force for a year. And yet, the evidence was thin. Searching his car and his apartment, nothing tied De Vera to Lucila. In fact, even De Vera's legal wife stood by him. For all his faults, for all the damage he had done to their own marriage, she believed Aniano De Vera could never have killed Lucila, not after everything they had been through, not after the child. Once again, the investigation stalled. Patrolman Aniano De Vera was indeed a violent man. But violence alone wasn't enough. Outside the precinct walls, the city was growing louder. The papers had found a name for her now, the Chop Chop Lady, an on-the-nose description of her death, repeated so often it began to drown out her life. The case was slowly slipping away, and unless a breakthrough came, something big or unlikely, Lucila would become just another headline, another woman lost to the void. Then, about 3 days later, the thread holding the case together finally snapped. A man walked into the station and confessed. June 11th, 1967, Sunday. 7 days since Lucila Lalu's body had first begun to surface across the city. And now, a man stood in front of them. His name was Jose Luis Santiano, but the name alone felt wrong. Wrong for the man they had imagined. Wrong for the kind of crime they had seen. He was 28 years old, a dentistry student, well-educated, steady, nothing like their first suspect, Florante Relos, who could barely keep himself upright, much less build a future. Santiano had no record of violence either, no drunken outbursts, no bruised faces, or nightclub fights like patrolman Aniano De Vera. He lived above Lucila's beauty parlor at Mayhalig Street in Santa Cruz. A boarder, renting a small mezzanine room since February 8th, living quietly, almost invisibly, just a floor above where Lucila had once built her life. He was a married man, a father of 5, someone with responsibilities, a life. Not exactly the kind of person you'd imagine cutting a woman to pieces and scattering her remains across the city. And then there was his heritage, the son of a retired police constabulary PC colonel, a man who had once commanded the investigator's own police chief. Jose Luis Santiano just seemed so unlikely, and yet here he was, standing in front of them, pale but composed, Perhaps the look of a man carrying the weight of what he had done, or perhaps something else entirely. The investigators watched him carefully, measured every word, because for all the strangeness, he did show something common to real confessions: guilt. He said he hadn't been able to sleep, that he kept seeing Lucila's face wherever he went. It wasn't proof, but it was hard to fake. That link, however thin, was enough to keep him in the room, enough to take him seriously. So what happened? His name had surfaced during the investigation, rumored as one of Lucila's lovers. But when Santiano spoke, it wasn't romance he described. He said that on the night of May 28th, his 28th birthday, Lucila had come to his room. He claimed she tried to seduce him, and that something in him snapped. A mental blackout, he called it. When he came to, she was dead, strangled, collapsed on the bedroom floor. Afraid, panicked, he did what he thought he had to do next. He broke her apart inside the mezzanine, inside his room. The mezzanine above Lucila's beauty parlor is a cramped space, squeezed between the ceiling and the world outside. The kind of place where the air didn't move and the heat seemed baked into the walls. At first glance, it looked ordinary. A narrow bed, a chipped desk pushed into the corner, a battered shelf stacked with textbooks on dentistry, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Nothing that spoke of death, nothing that warned them of what had been done there. But when they began to search, the picture shifted. Behind a stack of old newspapers, almost hidden, they found it. An 8-inch ball-peen hammer, its head stained dark, its handle worn down to smoothness. Lab tests would later confirm what they already suspected: blood. Entangled around the hammerhead, strands of hair, believed to be Lucila's. Nearby, tucked among the everyday clutter, they found more. A kitchen knife, a razor blade, the tools Santiano had casually mentioned in his confession, the ones he said he used to take her apart. Under the bed, bloodstains had seeped into the wooden floorboards. Dark patches, invisible at first, but there if you knew how to look. The investigators moved carefully. No voices, no sudden movements. Each object they uncovered seemed to pull the air heavier around them until it felt like even breathing was a kind of trespass. A working theory began to settle among them. He had struck her first, the hammer, then strangled her, then dismembered her. Jose Luis Santiano was their guy. June 11th, 1967. Hours after his confession, Jose Luis Santiano was transferred from Manila Police District custody to the National Bureau of Investigation, the NBI. A separate agency, more resources, more scrutiny. If there were cracks to be found, it would be their job to find them. On paper, it looked like the case was over. The confession, the blood-stained hammer, the knife, the razor blade, the dried blood under his bed. It was more than enough. The media took to it instantly. Headlines screamed about the case being solved. Newsboys called it on the streets. Radio hosts whispered grim satisfaction between songs. Lucila Lalu's death, gruesome, messy, public, finally had a face. For a moment, Manila exhaled. And then, a week later, everything twisted again. Jose Luis Santiano took it all back. He now said he hadn't killed Lucila at all. Said he had only witnessed it. A silent, unwilling bystander, as 3 other men committed the murder. Said he had been threatened into silence, threatened into taking the fall. He spoke about death threats, about fear, about confessions extracted under pressure. The police countered. They pointed to the evidence, the hammer, the blood. The confession was written in Santiano's own hand. They denied everything else. No threats, no tricks, no lies. Then came his family. They pushed back harder. They claimed he had been beaten, threatened, forced to sign whatever was put in front of him, forced to confess. Each side hardened. Each side dug in. No ground was given. Somehow, what had once seemed like a clear confession had become a mess. November 24th, 1967. In the Manila Court of First Instance, Judge Manuel Barcelona found Jose Luis Santiano guilty of killing Lucila Lalu. He was sentenced to serve 8 to 17 years in prison and ordered to pay 8,000 pesos to Lucila's family. It wasn't the grand ending the public had once demanded, but it was something. And for a while, Manila let it stand. The city moved on. New scandals rose. New names took over the headlines. Lucila's story, once screamed from every newspaper and whispered in every bar, began to fade. 3 years passed. Then on December 24th, 1970, the case resurfaced again, this time at the Court of Appeals. Slowly, piece by piece, the foundation cracked. The judges ruled that Santiano's confession, the backbone of the entire case, could not stand. The actual written confession was taken in a motel room, not inside a proper police station or government office. Without the right setting, anything could have happened, including coercion. Once the confession fell, so did everything else. The hammer, the bloodstains, the fragments. The court overturned the conviction. Jose Luis Santiano was acquitted. The case that had once gripped Manila, the Chop Chop Lady case, ended not with justice, but with silence and anger. Why did the police take a confession in a motel? What about the bloodstains? Or the DNA results? And if Santiano was truly innocent, then who was behind the dismemberment of Lucila? There were no answers, only theories, and most revolved around the 4 main suspects. Some pointed at jealousy, others pointed at desperation. But over the years, one theory stood apart, a theory that suggested something larger. In 1967, the Philippines was still a young democracy. The police constabulary, the PC, was consolidating its power. In time, the PC would become one of the most powerful institutions in the country, and eventually, one of the most feared. Despite its name, it would be known not just for protection, but for corruption and abuse, especially after martial law took hold from 1972 to 1981. But in 1967, no one saw it yet. No one imagined that if the son of a PC colonel was found embroiled in a scandal like this, the power to bury it might already exist. That is what haunts those who still follow the case. Not whether the real killer was ever caught, but whether the real killer confessed and walked away anyway.